For the past 10 plus years, we have heard and become accustomed to the word djent whenever it comes to the heavy metal marketplace. And whenever we trace back its lineage, whenever we look for the originators of this sound turned subgenre, it always seems to go back to the band Meshuggah. Meshuggah has always been a very creative product on the heavy metal market, an outlier of sorts. Really, ever since their inception in the early 1990s, this group seemed to want to do things a little bit differently. In this groove metal market, they sounded markedly different, using a guitar tone that did seem a bit unique and always gave them this air of being one of a kind. But now, of course, many years later, so many have decided to emanate this sound and have now created its own subgenre and culture. But what about this band Meshuggah? What about this group? How do their albums, all 8 of them now, full lengths, rank among themselves, not among heavy metal itself? It's time for us to examine Meshuggah's albums one by one, 8 to 1, and see which is the worst, which is the best, and which are in between. It's time for us to rank them all. And please, give us your list in the comments box below. Number 8 is Contradiction Collapse. This seems a bit fair considering this is their first album, and one that is honestly not a great foretelling of the band that was to come. It is an extremely creative release that does have some markings that some may say eventually turned into nu metal or some aspects of that. It was a lot more creatively diverse. They were taking a lot of risks with this disc, and as a result, it can sometimes sound a bit jarring. Like it goes from one idea to the next and doesn't have very much rhyme or reason to it. But don't worry, they very quickly were able to narrow down their sound and create something that would become heavy metal gold. Number 7 is Colossus. Now this disc might be a bit of a separation point for some, considering there are those out there that absolutely love this album. But whenever this first hit my ears, my immediate thought was some of that disjointed nature that we just talked about with Contradiction Collapse, a band that was trying to maybe focus a little bit too hard and got a little bit further away from their mission in the process. The songs were still very heavy and the tone was still extremely dense. However, it doesn't lend itself to memory the same way as some of the other albums that this band's been able to produce. Even though it does have its strong points, Colossus still just feels like it's more of a bottom of the barrel material album for this legendary outfit. Number 6 is Catch 33, an extremely interesting concept, one that saw the band try to go even bigger and deeper than ever before, and as a result, released this very strange conceptual-based album that has a lot going for it. The reason why this is so low on the list is not because of its, lending itself to memory or aging particularly poorly. It's more so based around the class that it's around. This is a disc that still has plenty going for it and does well to really further expand the growing experimentation that Meshuggah was willing to take on after some of their early successes. This is a disc that just, in the grand scheme of things, falls into place simply because others are a bit better. Such as number 5, which is Obzen. Once again, another album that decided to take some of the experimentation from the 1990s and early 2000s and go one step further with this. This was directly after they had some great success and were able to push things. At this point, they were starting also to gain a lot more attention, especially due to the renewed interest in heavy metal that the 2000s were able to give us. As a result of that, Obzen feels like an album that just really takes its shot and does pretty good in the process. Maybe not necessarily hitting a home run with this, but to continue the baseball analogy, at least hitting the wall and getting a double and perhaps maybe a triple if it happens to be a speedster. I'd say Meshuggah probably hit a triple, considering they do have some aggression and they do have some speed with their riffing. Great album. Number 4 is Chaos Sphere. As Meshuggah was growing and starting to hone in on their sound, especially after one key album that we're about to get to very, very soon, the material seemed to become more of a tone that Meshuggah was setting for its listeners for each subsequent release. Now with Chaos Sphere, they were able to take things and, go a little bit further than they had before, which is an important step of evolution that each band needs to do in order to really get further, both creatively, but also as an outfit. They became tighter and the sound became a little bit more honed in. Chaos Sphere boasts some of their strongest material as a result of this, and because of that, we knew that Meshuggah was not a band that was to not be taken seriously, but instead a group that we were probably going to be talking about for many years to come. Number 3, The Violent Sleep of Reason, one of the most recent albums that we've gotten from this group, and it was one that definitely had those old school feelings to it. It was something that whenever you jammed out to this, you immediately felt like you were in a time capsule going back 20 years to some of the earliest material that this band was able to produce that wasn't part of Contradiction's Collapse. That trademark sound was present. The sound was even more over the top due to the over the top production, but all of the songwriting was exceptionally tight. Nothing here felt like it was wasted. No mood felt like it was wasted. And as a result, this album was able to purvey to the nation and purvey to the world that Meshuggah was not slowing down anytime soon, and instead still had a lot left to offer. This is one that in retrospect, whenever you go back, you almost forget about it for a time. Considering it's so recent, that seems almost insulting. But whenever you do go back and check it out, you all of a sudden remember and recall just the feeling that you had whenever you listened to it for the first time and were banging your head alongside every single note. Number 2 is Nothing. Wow. An album with the simple name of Nothing almost sounds like it should be a 9 Inch Nails album or something like that, but this actually made a lot of sense for Meshuggah. And then whenever it comes to the material, this was one where that experimentation started to take them even further. We're putting in some more of a almost progressive tune to go alongside of that djent or that groove or that whatever you wish to really call it was starting to make sense. This was a band now that was all of a sudden taking their pre-established strangeness, the things that made them unique, the things that made them that heavy metal outlier, and were combining them with other things, almost hybridizing and becoming a band that was unafraid to take risks and was unafraid to explore their sound even further in order to try to hone in on something that could build a future for them. Something that would make their albums, despite very familiar but also exceptionally unpredictable. Nothing is able to accomplish this in many ways, but it's only due to the fruits that were bore prior that this was even a possibility. And that's because of number 1, Destroy, Erase, Improve. This is not the cleanest album that's out there. This is not the album that is going to necessarily sound the tightest. At times it is extremely sloppy. But that's the charm. That's the allure. That's the thing that makes Destroy, Erase, Improve the powerful album that it ended up being for Meshuggah. Because this was where that djent sound, this was where that strangeness, that thing that made them the heavy metal outlier, that made them immediately fixated by eyes and ears of listeners, was really able to come into the surface and was really able to showcase itself. Whenever you listen to this album, you never really heard this sort of tone or this sort of idea truly magnified to the degrees that Meshuggah was able to take it. Groove metal was able to do some of these things, but not in this way. This was a fresh take, a new vision of what this style of music could potentially accomplish. And in doing so, they also established a songwriting trope that became powerful and useful for them now for a generation. It's an absolutely incredible disc. Returning to this album is like taking a time capsule back to the 1990s, a time where we have been told over and over again that heavy metal was weak. But instead, we slowly begin to realize, due to albums such as Destroy, Erase, Improve by Meshuggah, is that all that has been meant by the term of metal being weak was that it was not in the forefront. It wasn't in front of the cameras. But instead, heavy metal was truly strong. And at this point, this band, still very much in the underground, screamed after they emerged from the surface, "Look at me, look at this, you aren't ready, but here it is." This is an absolutely legendary album among heavy metal, and for very good reason. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What was your list? Please let me know in the comments below. My name is coverkillernation. And it has been a pleasure throughout the years bringing you lists such as these and videos such as the others that are on this channel. I thank you, and I'll see you next time.